There are a few things that I have never changed my stance on as long as this channel has been running. The first one, protein is always king in my eyes. I change my mind on certain things, and sometimes I catch heat for that, but it's because I truly do follow the research, and sometimes I need to evolve my way of thinking on things. That's how you know you're getting at least up-to-date scientific content. But I have always stood strong in my stance surrounding protein. Okay, when it comes down to glucose management, it's probably the best thing. When it comes down to obvious muscle protein balance, it's definitely going to be the best thing. When it comes down to satiety, it's going to be, in my opinion, the best thing. When it comes down to thermogenesis and the thermic effect of food, well, protein is going to elicit a 20% increase in your metabolic drive, or at least demands 20% of your metabolic drive just because of the sheer digestion of it. So protein is always going to be king. Protein first on your plate, the first thing that you should eat. When it comes down to figuring out what you should eat, when in doubt, protein it out. It's always going to be king unless some crazy body of research convinces me otherwise. But it needs to be more than just one meta-analysis. It needs to be the entire world. And I know sometimes it feels like we're living in a world where protein is demonized, but it's really not. Sometimes it's misconstrued. Protein is still king. Number two, fiber is critical and has always been important to me. I am a big proponent of people that want to do carnivore. I don't do carnivore. And there's a very clear line between people that do carnivore and have zero fiber, goose egg, and people that do any other kind of diet and have a little bit of fiber. Why is there a clear line? Because they are two different camps that practically have different systems operating. There is evidence that suggests if you do carnivore, that zero fiber will actually work. Your body will start to adapt. But when you start getting into these camps of having just 5 or 10 grams of fiber, that is like not how it's going to work. Okay, it's not like if zero fiber is fine, then 1 or 2 grams is going to be okay. No, two different worlds. So my bottom line is fiber is important. I feel like fiber is a little bit of a stressor. It's a hormetic stressor. I also feel like it's good when it comes down to our microbiome. We see the benefits, but when I look at a sort of global perspective, I've always talked about fiber being very beneficial when it comes down to glucose modulation. Okay, it affects the microbiome, which affects us utilizing glucose, but it also affects fat oxidation. When our microbiome is more diverse because of, you guessed it, some fiber, that's going to impact how our cells use fat and fat oxidation. So sometimes I hear people say, oh, Thomas is just getting trendy talking about fiber. I've always talked about fiber, even with the low carb keto stuff. I think the microbiome is where a lot of this starts and where we are really starting to see a lot of interesting evidence. People that don't eat enough fiber and don't have a diverse microbiome, you see a lot of weird correlation with different things. Anyhow, people ask all the time, I did put a link for Seed down below. Yes, they are a sponsor on this channel, but if you are someone that maybe isn't getting enough fiber or you're thinking about your microbiome, definitely recommend that. That's the one probiotic I would definitely recommend. I don't recommend many supplements. I'm a fan of whole food. And at the end of the day, get your fiber from food. But if you need an extra leg up to help out with the microbiome stuff, they are the one to choose. Cool technology. They put their money where their mouth is. And when it comes down to microbiome research, they are leading the charge there as well, with a lot of their own money going into these microbiome studies. So I support stuff like that. That link is down below, saves you 15% off. I've always stood behind taking breaks from food. I saw a comment not that long ago that mentioned something about like, oh, well, you've always been a fan of like eating 6 or 7 meals a day. Why are you now saying not to snack? I don't think that's the case. And even if I did ever recommend 6 meals per day for like specific bodybuilding lifestyle or whatever, that would be very clear 6 distinct meals per day with no snacking. I have always stood behind the fact, and I continue to stay behind the fact, that we should have breaks from food. Having a break from food allows our body, A, the digestive break, B, the cellular break, but also C, it allows our insulin sensitivity to come back. If we're constantly bombarding ourselves with food, we're constantly knocking on the cell door, driving them crazy so eventually they don't open the door anymore. So taking a break from food, whether it be from fasting or very clear breaks in between your meals, That is something I stand behind. And again, I highly doubt I'm going to find enough bodies of research to convince me otherwise. The data is just there. I don't care if it's thermodynamics, calories in, calories out or not. Having a break between meals or having extended periods of breaks with fasting are definitely going to be important things I stand behind. That's why I stand behind fasting more than anything else. It's a tremendous way to lose weight and take a break from food. Number 4, and this is one that just confuses me that people think I've ever thought differently, calories still matter. Now, we are an open thermodynamic system, which means that we are complicated, which means that there are all kinds of external factors and environmental factors. Just like a wildfire that is burning out in the world, we have terrain, we have different fuels, we have different trees, we have shrubbery, we have humidity, whatever, all these different things that influence how that fire is burning. But one thing is not changing. That fire is burning. If there's a wildfire here in California, which there's like 1 million a year, there's all these different factors, but the fact is the fire still exists. And with calories, it's the same inside our body. Does it mean that other things don't influence it? Our brown fat thermogenesis, our resting metabolic rate, of course it influences it, and it might make it better. Does a lower carb protocol deny the laws of physics and math? No, but can it potentially influence it to go in a better direction? Positively, but that doesn't change math. And I stand behind that. I have not changed my mind. That is something I have known to be true from the get-go. I just try to take a little bit more of a global look at it and understand the big equation that we can't guess what our caloric needs need to be day in and day out. Number 5, and this is a big one that people think I've changed my mind on, but I have stayed steadfast in my ways. Carbs are a fuel, and they should be treated as such. People disagree with me on this, and I absolutely welcome that. That's the beauty of science. That's kind of the beauty of the internet. But carbs are a fuel. I feel like carbs should be used when we know we're going to be active. And now I view this possibly different from someone else. Okay, I do view carbs as something that is great for athletics and great for exercise and great for activity. I don't see a lot of a purpose in having high amounts of carbohydrates if you're not active. And that's probably where I lean into sedentary people probably do well with a lower carb protocol. But that's just my opinion, and I have data to back it up, but there's people that have other data to back their side up. And that's the beauty of the world that we live in. But I have always thought that carbs are okay when used as a fuel. Even when I'm talking about doing a low-carb ketogenic diet, I have still talked about the proper allocation of carbs. Pre-workout, intra-workout, carb backloading being post-workout. I still think that surrounding our activity, and I have always thought that surrounding activity, carbs are okay because they get burned. And I don't think they're bad otherwise. But I do stand behind the fact that they are a fuel, whether you're low carb or not. Look at even Paul Saladino, hardcore carnivore guy, has now accepted the fact that he thinks fruit actually has a role, and having the proper timing of carbohydrates from fruit might work to his advantage. And I'm not saying that he is the upper echelon of research. I'm saying he's someone that was steadfast, hardcore carnivore. Even he starts to see, carbs as a fuel, and it's the right carb, makes sense. Anyhow, I'm not changing my mind on these unless you can truly change my mind. I'll see you tomorrow.